what is our big vision in terms of moving forward our social justice work? What are we doing? Where are we going? And then we're going to be talking about how we can be more strategic and collaborate even more, and we'll be talking about that in breakout groups and then sharing back. So, Julie.
So, I want to thank Mimi for her beautiful Dvar Torah and for helping us think about intentionality and intentional choices and how we as a community can be really intentional about the resources that we have and where we want to channel them. And I want to thank the Torah of Money team for helping us to think about what those resources are, right? We thought about our time, we thought about our money. So I think we want to think a little bit about where it is that we want to be leveraging those resources. So I think it's pretty clear that building community is a really important piece of that. The piece we're going to dig in around now is what kind of social justice impact we want to have. And I think we could think about it on a couple of levels. I think we could think about what social justice means within our own community. What does it mean to build a community that actually reflects our values and the way we do things here and with one another? It can reflect how we do things in the Jewish community or what impact we have, and it can reflect the kind of impact that we have in the broader world. And so I think we're going to jump in from there. So as the social justice strategy team, which was folks from all of you, were thinking about where we could go, we had a couple of ideas that were exciting. So these are not specific strategic plans, but these are things that could be. Jewish Daily Forward. Reform Hebrew high schools implement sex ed classes across the nation. Boston area young adults pushed forward comprehensive curriculum. Would anyone be excited about this for 2020?
Is there a lab?
The Jewish Advocate, Minyan and Boston area synagogues announced 25% of year's Kiddush luncheons sourced locally and sustainably.
And the last one. Can I have a reader?
Massachusetts, from the New York Times, Massachusetts first in the nation to pass state living wage law. Interfaith Coalition mobilized voters to pass ballot referendum. Yeah.
Wow. So we're going to think a little about what it would mean to move towards visions like this, and we'll go from there.
Yep. But before we can go to the vision, we have to figure out where are we coming from? Where are we now? Noah.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Noah.
Hi, Noah.
Hi, Noah.
So I'm just going to give a little brief overview about where we're coming from. So I've been a member of this community for, I don't know, about a year now. And when I first got here, I realized there was a bunch of different teams, from sex ed, arts, farm to shul, CoFab, to Coon on Tap, to GBIO to get involved with. And at first I got involved with the Coon on Tap team to learn more about current social justice issues. But quickly realized that we needed a bigger coordinated effort to leverage our resources and power and be more intentional about reaching our larger social justice goals. So in the past, and some of you may remember this, we just had one social justice team because that was how big our community was. And then we quickly outgrew that, and so we tried to coordinate via social justice coordinating council, the Sojo Coco, I believe it was called. But this wasn't successful for various reasons, including that the structure relied on already overcommitted leaders to do extra work. So now we have multiple teams working on different social justice issues, which we represented by this paper over here, these different dots, which I'm going to briefly talk about. So we have the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, the GBIO, which is currently pushing for an increase in state revenue to support funding for critical services and infrastructure across the Commonwealth, and also has worked on passage of healthcare control legislation in the past legislative year. And in our housing justice team, in the past, helped pass a tenants' rights bill. Thank you, Rihanna, in the housing justice team in 2010. And is currently working with City Life Vida Urbana to inform homeowners and tenants who are in the process of being foreclosed on. Other efforts include the development by the sex ed team of a curriculum, as well as a curriculum which is in process being developed by the racial justice team. And then finally, the last point I'm going to highlight is the work by our inclusion and disability rights team to kind of foster kind of a whole education process and how we can incorporate disability rights more into our thinking in terms of where our new house is going to be. We had a great training last week, and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, currently we have a few different venues for getting the word out about our work. From Divar Tikkun, the time during Kavod Friday evening Shabbats, where we invite someone from the community to speak about their social justice work, to Tikkun on Taps, our monthly social justice bar nights, where similarly we invite members from the larger Boston community to speak about their work and how people get involved. We're actually currently, that group is currently on a hiatus. We are reworking that, but still a venue worth mentioning. Lastly, we have our online community calendar at kavodhouse.com/calendar to inform the community about these diverse efforts. And we're exploring other ways to support each other. But together, we want to think about how we can honor the organic nature of our work and the time limit of our leaders, and be more intentional and effective in engaging social justice issues as a whole community. So with that in mind, and in that vein, we're next going to hear from Margie Klein. I want to recognize her as the founder of this great community, who's going to talk about connecting these diverse social justice efforts into a more coherent study.
Yay, thanks. Let's hear it for Noah. So Noah's an awesome example of someone who fairly recently got involved and is now already up in front of everyone taking leadership. So about 7 years ago, when we created this community, we thought, we want to build a Jewish social justice community that allows activists to find a Jewish home and Jews to find a way to really make an impact in the world and everything in between. And I think we've done a really incredible job of building community. People from all across Boston who care about these issues feel like this is a place where they can explore themselves and the world and talk about important issues. And I think we've just done a really incredible job of creating a spiritual home for activists. So let's give ourselves a snap. And then there have been these moments when we've done really amazing coordinated work, but the community as a whole felt like we could be doing even more if we were able to connect the dots. So how can we connect the dots? Well, we formed my position was created, and we formed the social justice strategy team, which continued the work that the community has been talking about for a while of like, what are our actual priorities? So the PPAT, or the Political Power Action Template, is upstairs, and you can read it. The community approved it a couple years ago. But I want to just highlight 3 main goals that are going to help us to connect the dots.
Is COFAB one of the dots, and it's just not on there, or is it not part of social justice?
Okay, great question. So there have been first of all, I want to say Noah did a fabulous job of outlining a lot of our different social justice efforts. We also have a lot more, including things that are directed internally, and that's a really important part of our work. That's not an answer to your question. Such as like Farm to Shoal is like transforming the way that we relate to food, as well as transforming the way that other communities relate to food. But part of what people said to us was, we want to not only do things to have like a really pure community as ourselves, but to think about, are we actually making an impact out there in the world? So before we had this thing called COFAB, now we have it. I thought you were saying Sojo Coco. So COFAB is like is the Community Food Advisory Board, which is to help think about how we will do institutional purchasing. That would be considered internal, but then those guidelines will become external.
So isn't inclusion and disability rights internal if it's about our new house?
So
Nina's telling me to shut up.
Okay.
I wouldn't draw such a clear distinction, black and white.
Okay.
Because part of it is also,
This is like an example.
to some degree, when we're thinking about our goals, it's like, when do the things that we do internally become a model for other people? So we'd have to set really clear goals that are measured and whatever. Okay, So here are our top 3 strategies for how we're going to connect the dots, and how I'm going to be connecting the dots as I say them. Okay, number 1, create an integrated strategy for advancing our social justice goals by integrating Tikkun on Tap, Divrei Tikkun, and the work of the teams. Connect. Okay, number 2, intentionality and relationship building. Help us to become more intentional in our social justice work to ensure that we are making an impact not only within the community, which is important, but also beyond the community in Boston and beyond. This includes helping MKH develop stronger relationships with organizations, decision makers, and Jewish institutions that can help us meet our goals. And, does anyone see where this is going? Finally, we're going to prioritize and focus to help our leadership to make intentional choices about where to channel our energy and resources to prioritize key social justice efforts and ensure that we aren't spreading ourselves too thin to achieve significant goals in any area. What we're going to do in a couple of minutes is think more about how we can connect, but I just want to throw out a couple of things. Number 1, during the dinner part, there's going to be a community calendar. And one of the things we're thinking about is how can we line up our social justice work, oh here it is, yay,
We're going to show you.
with the Jewish holidays. Both because that would be a spiritually meaningful thing to do, and because we can really raise up the power of our work coming from a Jewish perspective by connecting it. So for example, there was a time when we went around this fall to say that domestic workers should get paid better, and we went and we blew the shofar at our Massachusetts senators' offices. Or what would it look like if when we wanted to work on immigration, we did some big Passover event that sort of used the Jewish themes of Passover to highlight our work, or to bring immigration into a more internal event like a Seder. So we've done some of the stuff that's like, how do we make our experiences more spiritual, but I don't think we've fully kind of capitalized on the political and media opportunities that are of connecting our team's work to the Jewish calendar. So what we're going to ask you to do in the breakout groups coming up soon, one of the things, is to think about how your team's work might be able to connect with some point in the Jewish calendar, and then also how your work might be able to connect with some other team's work, whether it's Shabbat, and having a Dvar Tikkun, or getting something out of Tikkun on Tap, or maybe it's like you say, hey, I want to connect accessibility with racial justice, and like how can we do an event together. So the idea is to just get people thinking about how to work together, so we're less a bunch of isolated dots and we're more a powerhouse. Yay! Okay, so this is just one part of the strategy. Our goal is not to be like, everyone has to, conform to the board. But we feel like there's been this community desire to work together more, and so this is really the beginning of a conversation about how to make that happen. We're going to have social justice strategy team meetings that everyone is welcome to every 2 months. And then we're setting up a working with movements team and a working with legislators team that's going to be thinking about how to build our relationships in the progressive movement world and in terms of political power. So if your teams relate to that, that would be a great thing to find out more about.
So when you're having dinner later, and this will be upstairs or in a hallway, maybe this hallway, that's kind of long, note that there are Jewish holidays in red. In green are Moshe Kavod annual stuff that happens on a regular basis, and in blue themes Jewishly that relate to that time of year. So you can write in ideas that you might bring with a team that you're a part of that could bring to light a certain specific partnership or movement.
Great. And the other thing we want you to do is highlight, if there is some semi-obvious big thing that we can mobilize everyone to come to. For example, let's say the learning team is Shavuot is going to be this huge thing, then we can try and mobilize everyone to go to that. Or if Farm to Shul wants to do something around Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish birthday of the trees, then it's let's just Like, think about what you could get everyone to come to so that our whole community is like helping each other to support our teams. So now we're going to hear about one particular way that we might all be able to mobilize our resources to work together. You want to say something?
Yeah, feel free to talk to me. This is maybe for people who can't see me. Like, feel free to talk to me about any of this at any time of day.
Yay! Okay, Eliza. To the other side.
Okay, great. That was amazing.
Yeah. Okay, 4 minutes. Great. So, hi, I'm Alicia. Knocking things over. It's my role. So I will try to be really fast. So we were just talking about connecting dots, and Margie already highlighted some of the times when we've really been a powerhouse and connected dots in the past in this community. So raise your hand just for like a really quick example if you were at the house when the governor of Massachusetts was standing right here. Okay, so there's a small cohort of folks that are still here. There's a video if other people want to learn more what that was about. But that was actually all of our teams came together to do that work. And so in sort of thinking about how we can make the biggest impact and really think about the social justice impact externally out in the community, there are definitely some opportunities we've had to really use criteria to identify what those opportunities are. And some criteria we thought about in that situation were that it's an opportunity to make an impact, right? So that here's a really powerful person who's listening to us. And it's an opportunity to make an impact on issues that we all care about. So the governor has power on a lot of the issues that our teams are currently working on. And the third one is that we could have an added value. So we play a role as a young adult community that he might be able to hear about things from us that he's not thinking of our priorities for young adults. So that's just an example. And so as folks have been saying, a lot of the time in our work here, we function in sort of a vote with our time, which is how this community's been able to thrive and become so successful. And at the same time, it means that sometimes we don't always prioritize these kinds of criteria and how, and there may be opportunities where these three kind of criteria come together that we could be making a bigger impact as a community. So the social justice strategy team wanted to basically ask the question, what would it look like to identify shared goals around social justice work that we could all get behind each year that meet the kinds of criteria I was just talking about. So, in the spirit of Passover, we're going to propose a possible answer to this question that we just asked, which is to propose a trial of working collectively on something that we know meets these three criteria and to see how it goes. So basically what we're talking about is, as Noah mentioned, the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, GBIO, which is 56 congregations, we're one of them, and along with another coalition that includes lots of organizations that we've heard from at DeVry Tikkun on Tap, that many folks here are involved with, they work for them or they're involved with in their own time, which is called Campaign for Our Communities. All of these groups, which is like probably hundreds of groups in Massachusetts and GBIO, are all coming together right now around the issue of increasing state revenue, which Noah mentioned. And the reason for that is that they've realized that all the things they want, similarly to a lot of the things that we want in our teamwork and our sort of broad visions for a just society, can't happen, at least here in Massachusetts, in Boston, in Brookline, etc., if there's not sufficient revenue, or basically money in the state budget. And so essentially, this is the issue that we can have an opportunity to work on that will impact all of the other issues that we care about. So just take like 1 second, 5 seconds.
That was a 5-minute warning, sorry.
Okay.
That's like a break, it's right back, so.
Okay. To think of your team, a team, and think about your broad goals for society in that team, and think about what the impact would be of not having enough money in our state budget on those goals. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that in groups, but just to get you thinking. And so the reason, there's a lot more information I'm not going to convey right now about the issue because we don't have time. Essentially, there's a structural deficit in our state's budget where the amount of money that comes into the state, it's pretty basic. The amount of money coming into the state has not kept up with the needs of people throughout the Commonwealth. And there might be a slide with some more stuff about this. But basically that's meant that this has been, that in the past, since 2001, education funding has gone down 30%, money for cities and towns has gone down 45%, and there's this notion of Taxachusetts that used to exist, but actually since the 70s, that's not been the case in Massachusetts anymore, and we've gone down, so now we're the 25th state in the nation in terms of the share of each person's income that they are spending on taxes, which is pretty low if you think about what sort of we think of as our state stands for in terms of taking care of everyone in our communities. So even though all these groups, GBAO, all the groups, like I can tell you who they are later, they're all working on this issue, it's actually really not guaranteed to happen. So this issue is considered the third rail because it is really about social inequality and reducing social inequality and changing it's about economic justice and changing the structure in our state. It's not something that people in power are willing to talk about at all. And so this is the moment right now where in the next 4 months this is going to be decided, and it can impact all of the things you may have light bulbed in your head, and you'll talk about in your teams, about what the state has the ability to do at all. Sorry.
Guys, this is a big deal, and Elisa doesn't get in front of everyone that often, and she just paused and said, at all, which means this is a big deal. I want to wake us up a little bit. I'm feeling like we need a little bit of wake up. So if you need to wiggle, just to like get your toes moving.
She should pull like a Rev Hill.
Can
I get it?
No, I don't have the preacher vibe going. I'm sorry. I'm trying to rush. So we won't be able to achieve a lot of the goals we want and all the things we've already won in terms of tenants' rights, in terms of making any progress around sex ed in schools for young adults. We won't be able to achieve any of those things if the state doesn't have the money for that. And this is going to be decided by July 1st. So that's why we're going to talk about in our groups how people want to be involved in this. How are we going to think about what we want to achieve collectively as teams, and we're going to talk more about the breakout groups in a second.
It's not a question, it was a comment.
Okay, hang on to it. How we can achieve collectively what we all want to achieve by working together. And we're going to start figuring this out in groups, and then we're going to keep the conversation going. There's going to be another meeting in April, and basically we want to schedule time that some folks can come and meet with teams at your meetings and learn more about how we can sort of connect the dots on this issue. And most of you have received calls or emails from me or somebody else trying to beg you to come to an event on this, anyone? Thursday. Woo! Okay, some people read their email. At noon. And we got lots of polite, I can't make it. Some people said they think about it.
But if you can't make it at noon, Tuesday from 3 to 4:30, there's also a lobby day around.
Right, but okay. So we're part of a coalition, and we've committed to send 15 people, and there's a yellow sign on the back of that wall that says we have 6 people going right now. So there's 9 more people that are going to have to be there on Thursday. That's all I'm saying. And now we're going to talk about breakout groups.
Great. So we just have a couple of minutes, and I just want to say, I know. And I just want to say there are a lot more teams than were listed on that list, and a lot more of them are doing social justice work. So,
Should we just shout it out then?
I think, why don't people just actually take 1 minute, and I'm sorry that we're killing the team breakout, but I want to make sure you have dinner on time. So if people could just think about something they do at the house. It can be a social justice team. It can be a community team like Shabbat or the men's group. And we're just trying out what it would be like for us all to think about how to integrate. This is just an experiment. So take a moment and think about something you do at the house and a way that you might be able to connect this revenue campaign to the work that you're doing. So we're going to take about a minute. I encourage you to write it down if you have somewhere.
Well, can we shout them out?
Yeah.
Oh.
We're going to take a couple report backs in a minute.
Well, we're looking for a house that's on public transportation, and public transportation gets cut back, so it'll be harder to find a house that's on public transportation.
If transportation doesn't get a product increase.
Right. Or like the bus line.
My legs were getting
So I got very did you see that I said two yellow people?
I did. It's okay. Don't worry.
Sorry, folks. Can we have like 3 people just share back an idea?
The house, or the new house, one of the criteria is being like very public transportation accessible, and so if like the MBTA continues to have like cuts as opposed to expansion, then it'll be continue to be like another obstacle in terms
So
of
our housing search team could get on board with this. Yes, thank you.
Working on the inclusion and disability rights team, and there's like 4 billion issues related to that are relevant to state revenue. But one in particular is that in the house search, it's become really clear that there's just not enough accessible housing for the people that need it. And while we're not actually the people that need it in that statement, it's something we should get behind because we're learning about how important it is.
Great. One more really brief response.
So the Farm to School team and the COFAB are thinking a lot about internal food justice, but also thinking about how much money there is in the state. Involves like how much wages people have that are not part of our community and are part of our community to think about food justice and access to food. And I think that as money goes up in the state, and then more money people have to buy food, and that's something that we also care about.
Great. Thank you for these ideas. I'm sure there are a lot more great ideas in the room, and we're excited to see what we can bring into action.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up with 2 things. Number 1, during dinner, your team, where are you going to write something down? On the calendar. Okay, and the things you're going to write down are somewhere that you fit in and what is your team's high points, so that everybody gets to go to your team for something and that we don't highlight everything at the exact same moment of the year, because then it'll be hard to do turnout. Okay, now I want everyone to stand up. We're going to do the grassroots stretch so that we have a lot of energy. Okay, so we're going to start by setting our goals really high. Reach up high. Okay, and then we're going to reach down to the grassroots. Okay, and then we're going to look at many different issues that we could potentially work on. But then we're only going to really focus on something very small. But it's going to be extremely effective. Okay.
Some freaking genius came up with that.
Well, I think she just made that up on the moment.
So much.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Social justice strategy, folks. We are now going to transition into talking about
Wouldn't
food.
you like to know?
We're all excited.
Can the couch dwellers take that dark thing down and pull the shades up?
And there's light. It's a beautiful sunny day.
Can I sit inside your legs over here?
Great. It's hard to be looking up like that the whole time.
No. Hold that.
Okay, my name is Meira Solaf, and we wanted to talk about the COFAB and the Farm to Shill, and I've been involved with the Farm to Shill team for about 5 years now. Yes.
I'm Davida. I have been involved in the community for about a year, and on the Farm to School team probably a little under a year actually.
Yeah, so you might be wondering, wow, we talk about so many important things. Why are we talking about just food? And I want to say that there are some really significant changes that are happening to how we relate to food that affect both our community internally and are creating models nationally and locally. So it's a really exciting win that we have to celebrate, and also something that will affect even what we're eating tonight. So I just wanted to ask, who here has cooked food at a meeting or for Shabbat or at any type of event? Awesome, lots of people. Who has bought food for a meeting or an event? Fewer people, but great. Who has made or eaten applesauce or hummus from one of our do-it-yourself events? Awesome. And who here has been to a community food advisory board meeting, a COFAB meeting? Sweet. Okay, so the big takeaway is food is something that we all benefit from and participate in at Moshe Kavod. So gets to the stomach of it. So
moving in. Your direction, we're getting there.
So I wanted to just explain a little bit for folks that don't know. Farm to Shul team started off thinking about how we could create more sustainable food systems for how food comes in and out of Jewish communities in Boston. And we liked Margie's exercise. We looked really wide at a lot of issues and decided that we needed to come in and focus to be most effective. And so it's a great model for that. And one of the things we started doing was focusing more on our internal system, and we realized we had a core group of people, maybe 4 or 5 people with a lot of alternates, many of you included, who were coming in and out of our meetings, but we really needed to include people who it might not be so easy to think about food, like people who think about money and are responsible for the finances of our community, or people who are thinking about, I need to get someone to volunteer for Shabbat, and now I have to tell them that they have to go to a local farmer's market. That's crazy. So we wanted to create a body that would have the most input possible and be most inclusive for something that's going to have a dramatic impact on the regular meetings of our community. So thus formed COFAB. And what's amazing about COFAB, other than its name, is that it also it included a lot of unusual suspects like the Shabbat and finance team, but it also became a source of enthusiastic volunteer energy, where it was initially an advisory board and has turned into a working group. So I say all of this history not to bore you and prevent you from dinner, but as an important show of a model of what I think is a successful team for Moshe Kavod and also for communities beyond. And I forgot what I was going to also say about that, but that it's an important thing about that. And also that we've both had experiences of successes and failures, so it's been a really important learning experience. And finally, that Farm to Shul went from this broad to kind of this more focused COFAB, and that's kind of been the heart of where Farm to Shul's work is now, which is also just something kind of structurally in the community to note that Farm to Shul is more COFAB now than it is Farm to Shul.
Great. So at our community-wide retreat last June, how many of you were there? Raise your hand. We presented our ketubah, which a ketubah in Hebrew is a marriage contract, and so we, as a co-founder at that point, drafted our ketubah. It is here. It will be up where you can look at it more later if you would like. Many of you have been a part of making this happen. And it's our kind of values and intention statement as a community around food and how it comes in and out of our community. We presented it to you all. We heard a lot of your feedback. The main takeaway points of our feedback that we heard from folks were inclusivity, folks wanting to make sure that no one ever felt judged for bringing something to a potluck that didn't fit in with certain values, that there was no hierarchy of what you bring or what you choose to eat. That we were also including a conversation around kashrut and food allergies in the community, which are 2 very important things and also part of inclusivity. And that we also were thinking about finances, which, as Meir mentioned, is an important piece of this, and making sure that what we're doing is cost effective, also in the broader context of our earlier conversation about the Torah of money. And then the final piece of feedback that we heard from people was like, what is this actually going to look like in the day-to-day at Moshe Kavod? What is this actually going to do or change? And so since the retreat, we have, as a group, come together various times. We meet every other month, and we have updated the ketubah to incorporate the pieces of feedback we heard from folks, and this is an updated version, and it's still there will be a finalized version at the retreat in June. We started thinking about like how to have fun together to stock our kitchen, which is how the applesauce event happened and the hummus making event happened, and there will be more of those. And if people have ideas, there will be an activity later where you can put ideas forth about new ways to do those activities. And then we created a questionnaire, which is sort of a way to still keep understanding where our food is coming from. When you go buy food now, in order to get reimbursed, you need to fill out a questionnaire online, and there's also a visual of that up. So stay tuned, you can see that later, it's upstairs. We also are working to figure out like how to figure out what to buy when you go to the store. So we're working to create a sustainable food guide for the community that will help you figure out if you're at the store and you're trying to figure out like which eggs to buy, or like if you're trying like how to actually live out these values is really confusing. And we have an awesome crew working to make that happen. And with regards to finance, we've begun to have conversations with Alana, our finance chair, to figure out how we can do this in a cost-saving way, thinking about bulk purchasing, CSA orders, and what that would look like in a way that we're actually saving money as a community and not just, doing these things because they're values we want to live out, which is also great. So in a minute, we're going to kind of move into a dot activity, and you get to get up, move around, give feedback, so you're not going to be sitting and listening, which is great. And our next COFAB meeting is a week from today at the house from 4 to 6:30 p.m., so it's March 17th, and if you want to know more about it, you can ask me, either myself, Helen, Eliza, or sort of the core people that are here right now. Sarah is not here.
Hillary.
Anyway,
Did you say
great.
Hillary?
Yeah, so I guess I just want to say, so in a moment we'll be getting up and I'm going to walk through what we're going to do, but what you're about to do also is something that we've, through this whole process, we've been reporting on at the Boston Jewish Food Conference. We've been in conversation with the National Food Movement food organization called Hazon, that what you're about to do is also something, and your feedback is going to be something that we take and also look at kind of immediately again for tonight to assess kind of what community's responses to this, but is also part of a process that we are sharing with other Boston communities who are looking at this example, like Dorsey Tzedek and Temple Beth Zion, and then also to Hazon. So you're doing kind of a historic thing, even in like a moment. So Davita's going to give you a Post-it, and each Post-it, take a few Post-its, I guess. Maybe take at least 4 Post-its. And each Post-it represents you and your 2 things. It represents your capacity, your ability to get stuff done, and your interest, your like excitement around it. So in a moment, we're going to ask everyone to get up and go to the living room and the dining room. This is the living room. And there's going to be posters all around.
There's actually there's 4 posters. There is one on this wall here. There's a menu of what's for dinner. That's not something you need to respond to.
You're
That's
fine.
something you're excited about. There is another one kind of on the back wall, and there's 2 next to in the window. So there's a total of 4. And there are
For
really
real?
questions. Some of them are about like brainstorming ideas, and some of the questions are more about trying to get a sense of the community's interest level and capacity around doing the food stuff together as a community, because ultimately this is a community-wide effort. The COFAB can have ideas, but we can't do things unless we actually know what people have energy for. So that's the frame, I think.
Yeah.
And how much time do we have?
You have about 15 minutes.
Great. So we have a lot of maybe before we get up then.
If you take less time, that's great too.
Are there any really brief questions about anything Meir and I have said about the COFAB that you think the group would benefit from hearing an answer?
Just clarify.
Yeah.
Do we write our like
So
names
you
or
know,
our comments?
sorry,
or
the
both?
pens are not to write on the Post-its. There are some spaces up here for fill in. It'll say like, do you have any ideas? So the pens are for you to write in on some of the posters. The Post-it notes are to vote or to show where your interest level is, and the posters will indicate. Maybe one of the farm to show folks will be by your posters, so if you have questions, you can ask one of us, we'll be by the posters.
Okay.
Is that hard?
Yeah.
Everyone's having one.
This is really the goal of this is to gauge for us your interest and ability and what would help support you as an individual to meet these goals that we set out around connecting food to social justice and community values. So it's, yeah, and if you have ideas or comments, it's a way for us to then, we'll be reporting back right before dinner based on what you're doing. So.
Yay, great.